Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into this incredible journey of how aviation went from a completely terrifying, fragile experiment into the massive, reliable global utility that we just take for granted today. I mean, we're literally going to track how the skies were sold to the public. Just look at this contrast. In 1903, the very first powered flight lasted 12 seconds. That's it. But flash forward just 55 years to 1958, and you've got passengers stepping onto commercial jets for nonstop, pressurized transatlantic flights. How on earth did human ingenuity shrink the world that incredibly fast? Well, let's dive in and find out. Part 1. From Kitty Hawk to War. You know, the sheer speed of aviation's evolution is just staggering. We jump from a sandy beach in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina in 1903 straight into the grim battlefields of Europe just a little over a decade later in 1914. And then, boom, Charles Lindbergh is crossing the Atlantic in 1927. This was a slow, actually, scratch that, it wasn't a slow progression at all. It was an explosive leap forward. Starting at the very beginning, Orville and Wilbur Wright's historic 1903 flight was absolutely monumental, for sure, because it proved heavier than air flight was physically possible. But the machine itself, it was wobbly, it was highly impractical, and way too fragile for any kind of everyday use. That first successful flight only covered about 120 feet. It was a proof of concept, right? Not a reliable mode of transport. But then, when World War I broke out in 1914, the airplane was thrust into a completely different role. The military urgently needed aerial reconnaissance and precise trench mapping. This intense pressure forced the rapid development of specialized aerial cameras, like multi-lens systems, and pushed engineers to build faster, higher-flying, and much more reliable aircraft just to survive and spy on the enemy. The war basically served as this aggressive incubator, permanently shifting airplanes from fragile toys into absolutely vital military tools. Part 2. Lindbergh sells the skies. So, enter Charles Lindbergh. This is the man who fundamentally changed the public's perception of flight. In 1927, he successfully completed a solo flight from New York to Paris in his monoplane, the Spirit of St. Louis, which took a grueling 33.5 hours. But he didn't just prove long-distance travel was possible. Because he was so methodical and careful in his planning, he became this trusted, calculating hero. He wasn't seen as some reckless, daredevil barnstormer. He was the guy who domesticated aviation and brought it down to earth for the masses. In 1925, aviation magnate Clement Keyes noted something absolutely crucial. He said, "It is a hard, cold, calculating job to turn the air into a medium of commerce." Keyes saw exactly what Lindbergh represented. He knew that to get ordinary people to actually buy tickets to fly, aviation had to completely lose its daredevil image. It required a ruthless, calculating business mindset to build the infrastructure, the safety, and the reliability needed to make flying a true profitable industry. Part 3. 2 days by plane. This massive endeavor to commercialize the skies officially launched in the summer of 1929 with a literal push-button moment. Charles Lindbergh, acting as the Airlines Technical Committee chair, stood in Los Angeles and pressed a Western Union telegraph button. 3,000 miles away in New York City's Pennsylvania station, a signal light flashed twice. And just like that, TAT, America's first transcontinental passenger airline, was born. It was this beautifully orchestrated media event summoning a brand new era of coast-to-coast luxury travel. But here's the catch. In 1929, aviation technology simply wasn't mature enough for safe, reliable night flying. So TAT came up with a really clever hybrid workaround. Step 1. Passengers flew in an airplane during the daylight hours. Step 2. At night, they transferred to a comfortable Pullman sleeper train. By combining the speed of the plane with the nighttime utility of the train, they successfully cut transcontinental travel time from several days down to just 48 hours. A real game changer. Now, to make this whole shebang work, Cat and Lindbergh had to actively engineer what they called air-mindedness. That is the deliberate cultivation of public enthusiasm and trust. Through massive national tours and brilliant marketing, they convinced regular people that the skies were no longer just for soldiers or stuntmen. They were absolutely safe enough for business travelers and tourists alike. They literally had to teach the country to think about distance and geography in a completely new way. Part 4. The Boeing 707 Revolution. Fast forward a bit, and interestingly enough, the Boeing 707's DNA actually comes from a military requirement for faster refueling tankers that could keep up with jet bombers. Boeing took that swept-wing, jet engine design and totally revolutionized the civilian market. The 707 introduced fully pressurized, climate-controlled cabins. It flew at much higher altitudes, smoothly gliding right over the turbulent weather that plagued older planes. And most importantly, it had the speed and range to enable nonstop transoceanic routes. The noisy, bumpy, slow propeller era, it was officially dead. But perhaps the most important innovation of all was a simple number, 140. That was the typical seating capacity of those early 707s, which is almost double what older planes could carry. To put that into perspective, by fitting so many passengers into a highly efficient, fast jet, airlines drastically lowered the operating cost per seat. For the first time in history, international air travel became financially accessible to the rapidly growing middle class. It wasn't just a luxury for the ultra-wealthy anymore. And let me tell you, the airlines instantly realized what a massive shift this was. They were absolutely ravenous for the 707. Just look at these numbers. Pan Am ordered 130 of them. American Airlines bought 128. Transworld Airways, which actually grew out of that earlier TAT airline we just talked about, ordered 120. This huge influx of orders firmly established Boeing as the dominant, undeniable force in global commercial aviation for decades to come. When you step back, the contrast is staggering. The past was defined by exclusive, slow, multi-stop, and honestly, pretty exhausting journeys. But the jet age? It brought fast, highly reliable, and widely accessible global tourism. The Boeing 707 fundamentally altered global economies. Suddenly, you could have breakfast in New York and dinner in Paris, connecting cultures on a massive scale that Clement Keyes and Charles Lindbergh could only have dreamed of back in 1929. The 707 truly shrank the world, transforming aviation from a fragile experiment into the absolute backbone of global travel. But all this leaves us with a pretty provocative question, right? What will the next revolution in the skies look like? We went from a 12-second hop to nonstop transatlantic jets in just 55 years. As technology continues to accelerate, what boundaries of speed, space, and distance will we shatter next? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep looking up, and I'll catch you next time.